Welcome, everyone. This is our May meeting of the Water for People and the Environment Committee. Um, you are probably at the right spot if you were looking for the meeting that would discuss water resources and coal plants in Texas. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to give it maybe another minute and we'll go ahead and get started. And if you're already here, feel free to use the chat and let us know your name, your city, where you're joining us from, and I forgot what I got for today, and a water-related issue that you've been thinking about lately. Okay, so we're at 6:31. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Evgenia Spears. I'm Water Program Coordinator with the Sierra Club Lone Star chapter, and this is our monthly meeting of the Water for People and the Environment Committee. And if you are joining us for the first time, the Water for People in the Environment Committee exists to educate Texans, connect them to experts on water topics, and the overarching goal for us is to make sure that every Texan is a strong advocate for water issues in their communities. In addition to expert advice and education, we also provide opportunities for networking. I understand it's an online meeting, but please feel free to uh, chat with each other in the chat, connect. And I've seen people connecting in the past using our chat, which is always great. And finally, we provide a place to belong. If you're concerned about Texas water issues, that's a huge burden. That's a big worry, especially nowadays as Texas is facing water crisis and the water crisis is growing. So feel free, feel safe in this space. And if you have any water related questions, just go ahead and ask them. Okay, I am having problem advancing. Here we go. So I have several exciting dates for you to share with you today. First off, we meet on second Monday of each month from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. via Zoom. So today is second Monday, and next time we'll see you will be in June. On June 8th, we will talk about impacts of seawater desalination on marine ecosystems in Texas. We'll hear from Dr. Jim Tolan, who is a former marine biologist in Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Then in July, we'll talk about Texas water consumption by water consumption by data centers in Texas, and that actually will be a great presentation also from Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance. I'm sorry for the typo on the slide. They just published a data center report. And as I speak, uh, keep monitoring the chat and you will see the links to all the resources that I'm sharing, including the registration links for these two meetings. Then the August date, August 10th, is still open, still deciding what topic we're going to discuss. And by the way, if you have a specific interest to discuss a certain topic, water-related topic, feel free to drop it in the chat as well. Public input is always welcome. And then in September, we will have a discussion about produced water and unplugged wells with Virginia Palacios from Commission Shift. So looking forward to all of these events. Save the date and let others know that great stuff is happening at the Water for People and the Environment Committee. I also wanted to announce, and here, sorry for the typo on the slide again, May legislative action meeting. On May 21st, which is next Thursday, the Sierra Club Legislative Action Team will meet and discuss priorities for next legislative session. So I strongly encourage you to attend these meetings. They're really great and very informative if you would like to follow water policy or other issues, environmental issues that Sierra Club works on. So the QR code is here, the link is in the chat, whichever way is more convenient for you to register. I strongly encourage you to do so and look forward to seeing you there. And this is our regular section, section H2O highlights, where we talk about water issues or water news that happened during the time we didn't see each other since last month. Just to date, the Senate on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs had a hearing, and one of the charges or one of the topics that was discussed during that hearing was seawater desalination, the feasibility of it, and the regulatory efficiency. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but Cyrus Reed was there, our legislative and conservation director, and I had a jury duty. Everyone is so excited about it always. But I listened to part of the hearing. It was very interesting, and at some point, if you haven't seen it, I will link it in the follow-up email after this meeting. So if you would like to hear what our legislators talk, how they talk about seawater desalination and what they're thinking, that would be a good video to check out, and I will be watching it later too. But as I said, Cyrus was there, our volunteers were there, including volunteer leaders who helped me run this committee and provided testimony. You can see the Sierra Club's testimony in the chat, so feel free to read that as well, and always reach out if you have any questions or more ideas. Then another important piece of information is the 2027 draft state water plan is now open for public comment through May 29th. And then the Texas Water Development Board will also have a public hearing on May 27th, but you need to register in advance if you want to speak on the state water plan draft. So just to provide you a little bit of background, the state water plan is the main water planning document that we have in the state. It looks at various contributing factors to various factors that can affect water use, water supplies in Texas, like population projections, existing water resources, water strategies that the state needs to incorporate not to run out of water, and so on. And this plan is published on a 5-year cycle. And so we are at that 5-year. This particular draft currently open for public comment is called a skinny version. So it's not necessarily a full, complete version of the state water plan, but it's sort of abridged. The Water Development Board is trying to put this version in place before they have to make funding decisions this summer. And then we will see the full version sometime towards the end of this year. I heard September, but I also heard later in the year. We'll see. I scanned through the plan. The biggest concern is that we are still planning around the drought of record that was 1950s drought, not accounting for climate change impacts. And the second biggest concern is that this plan provides statewide projections of water availability, and data center usage projections are not included in this plan. So if you don't know what else to say, at least these two things, you can submit your public comment or participate in the public hearing on the 27th. Again, more information is in the chat together with the links where you can learn more. Then another public engagement opportunity is Senate Bill 1145 that passed last session and authorized the reuse of oil and gas wastewater for land application is currently available for public comments through June 16th. And this process is happening at TCEQ. TCEQ will have a public hearing on June 15 to discuss specifically the rules. So when I say the rules, it means the bill passed during the last legislative session, and now the agency is working on the language that would provide a framework for the implementation of that bill. So, like, how do we follow this bill? So that's essentially what it is. I haven't looked at the rules to be honest, but I will do it this week, and we'll be happy to share some talking points with anyone who is interested in participating in this process. Then, as always, our chapter publishes all sorts of blogs throughout the months. The two blogs that I wanted to share tonight is the Draft State Water Plan blog. That is really great resource if you are new to state water planning. And you will learn a lot from it. It's packed with information. So feel free to check it out. And finally, Seawater Desalination blog that we published we highlighted regulatory gaps and policy solutions. So feel free to check it out as well. And the links are in the chat. So hopefully I didn't forget anything, but if I did, please let me know. And let's now move to our guest presentation for today with Lindsay Mader and Noah Verbeek from our own Sierra Club team. And we'll be talking about Texas coal plants and our water resources. Lindsay and Noah, I'm about to stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thanks, Evgenia.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for being here.
So we will wait for Noah to share his screen. He's going to pull up our slideshow. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. We are going to present on our report and dashboard on Texas power plant water usage, which just launched last week. So you might have read about it or heard about it on the news. So people have been talking about it, which is really good. Um, So I am Lindsay Mader, and I'm a resident of Central Texas. I'm a press secretary for the Sierra Club, and I cover a few states in my work, and Texas is one of them, and it's the one that keeps me the busiest. And I care deeply about environmental issues in my home state. And I want to tell y'all a quick story about how we got here and how this project got started. So, you know, data centers and their water usage has been in the news like nonstop. And the more we read about this, the more we wondered, well, what about gas plants? What about coal plants? How much water are these facilities using? With so much energy being needed for the future, especially from, population growth and the data center boom, what larger impact would this have? And it's an especially important question considering that there's water crises around the state, like what's happening in Corpus Christi. And at the same time, we have an administration right now where the EPA is propping up coal plants around the country, and these coal plants were slated to retire. So we also were wondering what if that happened in Texas and a coal plant or one or more got propped up to support this AI boom, what impact would that have and what impact would it have on all Texans, right? So we decided to run the numbers, and Noah is our analyst. And when he got us some preliminary figures, we realized that there is a big story here that should be told. So, to do this analysis, NOAA took 10 years of data on power plant water usage from the Energy Information Administration, and we also analyzed the water rights currently appropriated to every coal plant in Texas to show the true scope of coal's water needs. And this data looks at power plant operations. We're not looking at manufacturing of materials. We're not looking at construction. So this is purely day-to-day operations. To present our findings, we produced a dashboard and a report. And the dashboard is amazing. It is nationwide. You can look up water usage for I think it's almost all of the power plants in the nation that produce a certain amount of energy. And then the report takes all of the Texas findings and packages it in one spot, along with some information on how thermal plants use water and how utilities have used water rights in Texas. And then we end it with some recommendations for decision makers. And with that overview, I'm going to pass to Noah so he can talk to you about the analysis and dashboard.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and talk to you all about this report. We were very excited to get this out a little under a week ago. My name is Noah Verbeek. It's he/him pronouns. I am currently in Seattle, Washington, and I'm a senior energy campaign analyst for the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. And like Lindsay said, Lindsay came to me probably close to a year ago at this point with this question around how much water are coal plants using. Um, and so to start with, I think wanted to start with a little bit of background about why do thermal plants like coal plants use water at all? So the reality is thermal plants depend on water about as much as they depend on fossil fuels from the ground. Most thermal plants, and right now we're showing this graphic shows a fairly generic illustration of how water is used and how a thermal plant operates. But they have loosely three different types of water that they're using. So there's one flow that you're seeing in the top left corner, which is water that is flowing into the boiler, and then it flows through a turbine, makes that turbine spin, that generates electricity that goes to the grid. When that water exits the turbine, it needs to be cooled down in order to flow back in and recycle and keep this loop running. And in order to cool it down, what a lot of thermal plants do is they run a second stream of water over it through a heat exchanger to pull some of that energy out and cool it down. And then they store that water either in a cooling pond, or they use a cooling tower to bring it back down, and they can keep reusing it. And then there's often a third cycle, third water flow, which is used to flush ash out of the bottom of the coal boiler. And so when you hear about coal ash, and coal ash water storage, and there's been some EPA rule rollbacks looking at coal ash disposal. Those are looking at that third flow, which is down on that bottom left-hand corner. But for now, for this report, we wanted to focus on that cooling water flow. So what's on the majority of the right side. So we're going to zoom out a little bit to have a bit of a simplified diagram of what does that look like and how do those flows work. So the specifics can vary depending on the power plant and the type of cooling system that it has. But generally for coal plants in Texas, plants divert some amount of water from a water body into a cooling pond or reservoir. And these ponds or reservoirs are generally man-made. They can be really huge. And they're used to store water that then the plant can withdraw, run through its condenser in order to cool down its internal systems, and then it gets returned back to that cooling pond. And then at certain times, it can also discharge some water from that cooling pond or that reservoir back into the water body. And throughout this process, both when the water is sitting in that cooling pond in that reservoir, or if the plant uses a cooling stack or cooling tower, there's what we call consumption or forced evaporation. That's water that's evaporating out of these systems, this relatively hot water that's coming out of the thermal plant. And that's water that evaporates out and is gone from that system. It needs to be replaced with more diversion or replaced in some way so that plant can keep operating. All four of these flows that we show here, diversion, withdrawal, discharge, and consumption, are all self-reported by generators in EIA data in a couple of forms. And we wanted specifically to focus on consumption and slightly on diversion. And then Lindsay's going to talk a bit about the amount of water and the water rights that are held by these plants for diversion, consumption, and what's in those cooling ponds. And what we found when we looked at that consumption data, that water that's evaporating out, is that Texas coal plants consumed 34 billion gallons of water in 2024. This is a massive amount of water, and it's not just the coal plants. So the coal plants consume 34 billion gallons of water. Plants running on gas consumed another 56 billion gallons, and the state's two nuclear plants consume 26 billion gallons. So across these three fuel sources, the total water consumption at thermal plants totaled around 100 billion gallons or more every year since at least 2015. And in those 10 years, every single year, coal plants consume between 30 billion and 45 billion gallons of water every single year. And meanwhile, we have alternatives that consume less water. Wind, solar, storage, together they consume negligible amounts of water, and they're generally cheaper and cleaner than thermal resources, and they're faster to bring online than a lot of the resource alternatives that we're looking at. And you can really see that in this table here, which we include in our report. And this looks at the typical rates of water consumption by primary fuel source or by use type. And on the left, we have coal, nuclear, and gas plants in the US and in Texas. And we can see the amount of water that they use per megawatt hour of energy they produce. And those two things are generally related. As the plants run more, they need more water to cool down, is quite astronomically, especially compared to the amount of water that renewables use, which is around 6 gallons per megawatt hour. For some solar plants, it's basically none for wind. We're also including on here data centers as a data point for comparison, which consume about 95 gallons of water per megawatt hour that they use in order to cool their operations. And we'll talk a little bit more about data centers in a little bit as well. So this data is all pretty complicated. There's a lot of different pieces going on, and the EIA forms are not the most accessible thing to look at. So we wanted to make this more accessible and understandable and usable generally. It looks like Avenia just sent the link to the interactive map, which is on our website. So you can click that link in the chat. And see the dashboard that includes all of this data. So we looked at the amount of water used by all large regulated thermal plants nationwide, everything that's reported in the government EIA data, and organized it by the primary fuel source in 2024. So what was the fuel that was burned most frequently in 2024? And I'm not going to do a whole demo of the dashboard. I'll let you kind of play around, but I do want to highlight a few of the pieces that are included here. So at the top, on the top right, we have the plant name and its location. So right now I have Fayette Power Project pulled up, which is in Fayette County, and the cooling system that it uses. Fayette uses a recirculating system with cooling ponds. That's a pretty common system in Texas. It's a pretty common system across the US, and it's generally what's represented in that graphic. And you can see that in that generic diagram. This differs slightly by system depending on how it's set up, but generally we can see that there. Then we have the filters so that you can change the primary fuel in 2024, the state that you're looking at, or if you wanted to look at a specific plant, you can pull that up and see how much water it's using. And then you can also choose what flows you want to show on the chart. So right now we're just showing diversion, which is water that's being taken from the water body and into the cooling pond. And we're showing consumption, and that's water that's evaporated and gone from the system. Different systems show water flows in slightly different ways. So if there's no cooling pond, water is withdrawn straight from the water body into the power plant, and you can change those filters so that you can see the amount of water that's being used for other systems. And then we're also showing the net generation, which is correlated with water use in that green line. And generally it varies depending on a host of different factors, such as the outside temperature and how the plant is operating. But when there's more net generation in a given year, there's generally also more water consumption. And again, that varies depending on the plant operations. So I encourage you to poke around on the dashboard and take a look at a lot of the data that is in there, and we'll try and keep that updated as well as new information comes out. Right now it's just through 2024, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to update that to keep more recent data. And with that, I'll pass it over to Lindsay to talk about the other piece of this story, which is how much water these plants are allowed to withdraw, how much water they're allowed to consume, which is another pretty astronomical story. So I'll pass it back to Lindsay.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, so, NOAA's analysis of EIA data illustrates the massive amount of water that coal plants consume every year. And we knew a piece was missing because, if you just think about that illustration that shows the places in the plant that use water, there's a lot of water being used, at points other than forced evaporation, right? So we wanted to figure out a way to tell that story. And capture that really the true scope of the impact, right? So some coal plants in Texas use groundwater, and this is pretty unregulated. Basically, if you drill a well, you can seize groundwater. Now, there might be a conservation district that you need to work with and get a permit from. But other than that, it's pretty simple. So most coal plants actually have used surface water to feed their plants. And the reason for that is that it's more regulated and more dependable. So the state issues water rights for entities that want to use surface water. And the older the right, the more priority that right holder has to the water in times of drought. So, I think that the coal plant owners valued that assurance, right? So I decided to try and dig into water rights to try and capture this other story. And water rights are kind of a wild world. I was surprised along the way, many times. But yeah, I first tried using this spreadsheet. I took a screenshot of it. This is the TCEQ active water rights spreadsheet. And it's really a pretty simple way to track something that's pretty complex and important. And I quickly realized that using this spreadsheet wasn't really going to work because there were some outdated water rights owners listed, and I caught some missing numbers in the consumptive amount column, diversion amounts, storage amounts. Not everyone was inaccurate, but I did catch a few, so I just didn't feel very confident in using this. And at one point, I thought maybe this is just a spreadsheet for that TCEQ like gives to the public to like mess around with. But no, I actually, the more research I did, the more I realized that there are regional water planning groups that are using this same spreadsheet to make some pretty big decisions. So I moved on and I decided to use TCEQ's interactive water rights map, and this is a really good tool. It's a little wonky. You have to figure out how to type in your search terms and different layers of the map and everything, but it works really well. The catch is that you have to know the water right ID or the water right owner to find something, or you need to know where its location is so you can locate it on the map. So you can't isolate all the gas plants in Texas on the map. You have to do it piece by piece. And you can see a screenshot. These are just some water rights located in the San Antonio area. If you click on the green dot, it's going to pull up a link to the historical water rights documents. And that pretty much had most of the information we needed. So at that point, it was really just reading through a lot of documentation. We knew where all of the coal plant reservoirs are located in Texas, so we were really able to just easily go to the map and locate those. So we did focus this effort just on coal plants, and I think it's worth discussing why focus just on coal. Well, as a Texan, I was so surprised when I started working for the Beyond Coal campaign and I learned that we still had 12 operating coal plants. I had no idea. This seemed like an astronomical number to me. And it kind of is because Texas still produces more coal-powered energy than any other state in the country. Our 12 coal plants mean that we have more coal plants than 47 other US states. So, these are still some of the most harmful facilities operating in our state. And we can't really say that coal is on its way out because we're facing uncharted waters with the EPA propping up coal plants around the country. Now, gas uses more water statewide because we have so many gas plants, and coal uses more water per megawatt hour. So both of these are extremely water hungry. And again, we know that renewables and battery storage use barely any water to operate. So first we sought to determine each coal plant's impoundment rights, which is basically just storage rights. How much are they storing in these big reservoirs? And these were fairly easy to determine. They're very clearly described. The terminology is consistent. Usually it's on page 1 because they had to build the reservoir to like even get started. So, I think it's important to point out that the coal plant, even though this amount of water is not reflected in the EIA consumption data, the coal plant is using that reservoir. It is using it usually for recirculating and cooling. So it's not being consumed, but it has this water stored right there for it to operate. And in many cases, it's off limits to other users. We also tried determining consumption rights. And this was a bit trickier because these tended to change more over time. So typically we would see that a coal plant would get more consumption rights the more time passed. So that just meant we had to read through pages and pages of water rights amendments to ensure that we were likely capturing the current amount that was appropriated for this. So the EI consumption is water that's totally gone from the system. The consumption water rights represent how much water a coal plant is allowed to take if that water is there. So let's say we have a really rainy year and this river in Texas it's flowing, it's beautiful, there's lots of water in it. And instead of that extra water being used for conservation or environmental flows, if a coal plant has the right to take more, it can. And, I think that Most people are really shocked when they learn that coal plant owners receive these water rights from the state for free. And this is likely because power plants, especially back then, were seen as providing a public benefit and being good for the economy. Energy options now, that barely use any water. And even though these wealthy utilities are receiving these water rights for free, there is nothing in place that requires them to return that right to the state. They actually usually sell them or transition it to another usage category. And our analysis of water rights revealed that 7 Texas coal plants can store 98 billion gallons of water and consume 116 billion gallons of water every year. So the consumption rights are every year. And that is just coal. That is not gas, it's not nuclear, this is just coal. So this shows us just how much more water coal plants are using, and they have the rights to use if they so wish, and it's there. And like I mentioned, this water is really largely out of reach for other uses. There are a few reservoirs that invite public usage. However, as you can see in this beautiful photo taken by Al Braden, that is not a good idea because you're in very close proximity to the stacks that are emitting tons of harmful pollution. And we've been out to Martin Lake a few times and seen people swimming because there's no information posted and people don't have the information they need to know that that's dangerous. So that's water rights. Now, the next section is on our recommendations for utility companies and decision makers. So our beloved Cyrus Reed usually gives this part of the presentation, but he had to be at a meeting tonight. So I'm going to try and stand in for Cyrus and channel everything I've learned from him. And if y'all have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those in the Q&A, but we might also have to get back with you when he's available. So because the plant owners have those water rights, that gives them a lot of power to decide what happens with them. But we know that we can't leave it up to plant owners alone. So we know we also need to put some pressure on our state government. So utilities, yes, they hold the water rights, they hold a lot of the power. We would really like to urge all of these coal owning companies in Texas to start planning now to retire your coal plants by 2030 at the latest. This gives you almost 4 years to plan your replacement generation. And we know that by making a strong shift to renewables and battery storage, they can donate their water rights to the Texas Water Trust, which sets those rights aside for environmental flows, environmental protection. And this would save the state billions of gallons of water every year for free, and our grid would be more affordable and reliable. So it sounds like a pretty good idea. But like I said, that doesn't always just happen because it's the right thing to do. And usually that's where government oversight comes in, and it doesn't always work as well as we'd like it. So this is a little diagram that Cyrus made trying to illustrate all the different entities within our government that touch water. You can see that the legislature, they can direct these 3 different agencies to do specific things, and they appropriate funding to do those. And the governor appoints the commissioners who serve on these boards and different commissions. So that's important, right? Because a lot of the commissioners and board members do make decisions, right? So when people get mad at TCEQ, it might be a good idea to look at who's appointing them because that person is actually elected. So you can see the different responsibilities that these different agencies have with water. And they're all kind of related. They work together a lot of times, but they each have their distinct path as well. And while our dashboard and analysis do provide a lot of useful data, we need the PUC to take this data and these numbers and carefully consider them. So just as our legislature directed the PUC to look at water usage by data centers, we are urging the PUC right now to do the same thing, to do a major study on coal plant water usage and conservation strategies. And the PUC could also prioritize stronger energy efficiency programs, which would help us meet our electricity needs without using any water. So that's a pretty good argument for more energy efficiency. Now, as Evgenia mentioned at the top of the call, the Texas Water Development Board just released its 2027 state water plan draft. And this is an opportunity because this draft and the way the board operates overall, their methodology, they do not really do much planning for the entire energy sector. They basically require that projection amount to stay the same until 2080, even though we know certain coal plants will retire. I mean, most of, they have finite lifespans, so it makes no sense. It's a huge missed opportunity. If there were more incentive for us to replace those plants with renewables and battery storage, that could be billions and billions of gallons of water saved every year. And that our Water Development Board is not considering this is pretty eye-opening. So we're urging it to change its methodology for steam electric water demand. And also consider these retirements because we need to make a change here. Yeah, and right now is a great opportunity. It's open for public comment. So if you feel, as passionate about this as we do, it's a great chance to submit a comment. I think the chapter might be doing something with that down the road in a couple weeks. So on to TCEQ. Now, circling back to the water rights system, it really is kind of a mess. It's really hard for organizations or the public or reporters to understand the way they present the information or even just get the information that they need. So this system could be improved quite a lot. And TCEQ has also not done a real analysis of water rights in the state and how they're being used or if some need to be canceled. So TCEQ has this authority to deal with unused water rights, and we think they should do an assessment and consider cancellation when appropriate. And they also need to work with these other state agencies to consider how the freed rights could be quickly used for environmental flows through the Texas Water Trust, which is a really cool thing, the Texas Water Trust, and it's just not used that much, really at all. So it's there and it's not being used. And Cyrus pointed out that the 2023 sunset process recommended such an analysis, but it's so far been ignored. And, not only do these coal plants use water, as Noah mentioned, they also have those ash ponds and these other kind of like ponds or landfills that are contaminating our groundwater with coal ash residuals. And we also would urge the legislature to do a study on all of the groundwater near these contaminated sites because, Texans deserve to know what's in their water. And there was a study done by, I think it was the Environmental Integrity Project, and it's almost 7 years old, but it found widespread contamination. So they should follow up on that. And lastly, because a lot of this has to come from the ledge, we need TCEQ we need the ledge to require TCEQ to do this assessment and begin cancellation proceedings where appropriate. We need it to fund the TCEQ analysis on beneficial uses for freed rights, and we need them to fund a study on groundwater contamination for coal plants. So there's a lot to be done, but it's also a lot of room for opportunity, and especially now that we're actually like having this discussion and bringing power plants' water usage out into the open so that people know what's going on. And that wraps up our presentation, and we have time for Q&A. If anybody has questions, we will do our best to answer.
Yeah, there's a few questions in the chat already. So I will kind of go through them and take a couple too. So the first is from Carol. Lindsay, could you say a little bit about how the Texas Water Development Board looks at energy use for water use by energy producers over time and kind of what they expect to happen over the coming years?
Yeah, it's not like they just haven't thought about it at all. It's just that I think we disagree somewhat and think they should be doing more. But they say that, whatever energy generators are using now, let's just keep that level consistent for the end of all time, basically, because we know that demand isn't going to increase. We know that some plants will retire. So let's not bother doing an actual, like, deeper analysis on needs and shortages and demands and conservation strategies. So that's pretty disappointing. I read a regional water plan. I think it was out of East Texas that they were expecting shortages in the steam electric sector. And their plan for dealing with that shortage was to drill more groundwater wells. To us, that doesn't make a lot of sense when you could look at retiring coal plants. I hope that answers your question, Carol. Was there anything that I didn't touch on? Okay. We can move.
Great. I'm going to go one other question that was in the chat earlier, and then we'll pass it. I see some hands up. So, because I think there's a few kind of in the same vein. So Steve asked, how do these water demands compare to what households use? So we have this in the report. So Texas coal plants use about as much water as roughly 1 million homes every year. So that's a city about twice the size of Austin. And power consumption is in the top 4 water users in the state. I think the top 2 are municipal and agriculture. Lindsay, you can correct me if I got any of that wrong.
Irrigation, yeah.
And irrigation. But one of the key things that we have with the power sector is we have good alternatives, right? We have wind, solar, and storage, and we know that these systems work and they're cheap and they're fast and they're clean. And then they don't use any water. And so we have the options and paths forward to really reduce that water usage. And that's where we're encouraging that for that to be fully studied. And I hope that answers your question, and feel free to jump back in the chat if you'd like. But yes, we got a hand up. Feel free to come off mute and jump in.
Hi, my name is Sade Hogue. I'm with Bayou City Waterkeepers. I wanted to know if we wanted to move forward to get active and to join the fight to be able to, do public comment. What are the next steps for us?
I think Cyrus has told me that the chapter, and Evgenia could help answer this, but the chapter has plans to lead a comment push for the state water plan draft and whatnot.
Yes, yes. We are working on the comments, and I already see in the chat that Carol is interested in talking points to prepare the comments. So I will work on that later this week and I will share. We still have time, which is great, but it doesn't mean we should procrastinate. So I will share the talking points to help you put together your comments. Absolutely.
And if we needed additional assistance, if this is our first time being able to put in the comments, how would we go about connecting with Sierra Club?
Oh, that's a great question. I will share my email in the chat along with our other volunteer leaders that help with this effort. And let's stay in touch. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll just say, last session we lobbied around the banner of Protect Texas Water at the Capitol. And I think that's a really important banner. This committee is called Water for People and the Environment, something we've been talking about for years and years. Whether it's desal, whether it's data centers, whether it's power plants, we're in a real fight here, and legislators and decision makers need to continue to just hear from people that, hey, we're concerned about all of these issues, whether we're in Amarillo, Beaumont, Houston, El Paso, and in between. So a lot of our work connects like that, and happy to keep you plugged in.
So my question, this is Hermione Vinas. Did you guys actually also track the runtime of these plants? You have capacity factors, which is installed capacity, but you didn't talk about runtimes, even though you talked about they only contributed 13% of the power, total power throughout the year.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we didn't look specifically at runtimes. We have the data available. I'm curious if you could say a little more on like what you would be interested in knowing and what your interest is with runtimes, what you would expect to see.
Well, because there's only 13% of the capacity, these power plants, some of them only run over the summer, some of them only run are base loaded, and so you can actually target the coal plants that are the most abusive and not worry about the ones they only run 3 months out of the year. So it's I know it's technical, but it's trying to be more uh, poignant with your actions.
Yeah, for sure. And there is more data in there, and I'm happy to if anyone has additional like more specific questions on the report or the data and then what we have available in the back end. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of coal plants across the country that are only being used in fairly rare scenarios, which is an incredibly expensive and incredibly polluting thing to do. And again, especially when there are good alternatives that we really need to maximize.
And the other thing is that we use Texas is the highest electrical use throughout the whole United States because we have air conditioning needs year round, and none of the other states have that same thing. So we're special.
Thanks for the question. I see that Myron was a very great advisor for me on some of this water rights stuff, and he's pointing out that the priority date of the water right determines who has the right to use the water. The type of use is not a consideration. And that's something that really surprised me, because you'd think they'd triage use types, but they don't. I'm just scrolling through to find another question. If somebody already has one pulled up, you can go ahead.
We can go ahead here in the chat. There's one question. It's my understanding, Tanda is asking, by the way, it's my understanding that Marvin Nichols Reservoir, okay, so I will address that in the chat. How did you determine, hold on a second, there's a report related question from Veronica. Thank you for the report. Regarding El Paso, large power plants is missing from the dashboard. Also, how did you determine that we are abnormally dry and not in a drought?
The drought zones that are on that map were determined by looking at the drought monitor, the government drought monitor website, and those are from March. So I don't have every county memorized, but I know like Central Texas is not as dry as it was in March. But it was too late to update the map, and we decided that also, I mean, this is kind of how Texas is. We'll get a lot of rain, and then we just still go back to drought or like extreme dryness. And I'm sorry about the which El Paso plant is that? And we can look into it.
You can go ahead and unmute
It's
Veronica.
thank you. It's the Montana Power Station.
Okay.
The copper station is also missing, but I think it might be maybe too small for, I'm not sure what generation you're looking for or which ones made it into the dashboard, but the Montana Power Station is pretty large.
Okay. We'll look into that. And I know, I don't know about the copper one. These are just energy generators. So like if there's a small plant that has its own on-site generator, I know Noah and I were talking about that. We're not totally certain if EIA is tracking that or not.
Yeah, I believe this is primarily grid connected. I will take a look at the Montana power station. It's a appreciate you bringing that up and check what's happening. It's also possible that it's in under a different name. Sometimes EIA has naming, so there's a map there. I'd take a look at the map to see if it's there. But I will take a look and see what's going on in the back end of the data. I appreciate you flagging that.
Okay, then the question from Frank in the chat regarding the groundwater pollution caused by coal waste ponds. How much has this been studied in specific Texas locations? And how much has this been documented and publicized?
I'll jump in. Most of what we know about specific groundwater pollution in Texas comes from that EIP groundwater report, and I'll try and link to that. And then also, each coal plant has to be in compliance with different EPA rules on the coal ash residuals and the effluent limitation guidelines. So there is some data out there on their compliance numbers. We don't have like a dashboard or anything for that. So if you have like a specific question, you can email me. I have my email address at the end of the slideshow, and we can figure that out.
Sorry, I was talking all this time while being muted. Thank you, Lindsay. It's been a long day. Sorry. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat, so you feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask. No other questions? Then I guess we can wrap it up. And
Is this produced water a big threat? I mean, isn't that salting the ground? That could be a permanent loss of agricultural biological productivity, right? Or are they saying they're going to somehow clean it up? That was the bill that was passed in the last legislature.
Oh, okay. SB 1145. Yes. So we do have concerns as produced water, as oil and gas wastewater, highly toxic, has heavy metals, sometimes even has heavy metals, organics, and inorganic materials, also sometimes even radioactive materials. Texas has the Texas Produced Water Consortium. It's a body of scientists who are working on this issue and established at Texas Tech. And they're making progress to figure out how to treat produced water for beneficial reuse, including land application, which that bill authorized. But they still are saying that there's a lot that we need to learn before we jump onto it. So as far as rules of the bill, I haven't seen them, but I can already say that the language of the bill, when it passed, did not include any enforcement mechanisms, any mechanisms for mitigation, and all other things. And you are right raising the concern that the water is highly toxic. It's also extremely salty, specifically in the Texas part of the Permian Basin. It's very salty. So when we compare the treatment of produced water found in Texas to treatment of produced water found somewhere, I don't know, in California, it's not a fair comparison because of salt levels and laws surrounding, fracking operations. So I can also provide the talking points. In fact, that's on my list to create talking points for people to participate in the commenting on this rulemaking. If you'd like, would love to do that. Any other questions? Steve, I saw you unmuted. Okay.
Oh, did you say something about commenting on those
Yes.
rules?
I will send a follow-up email to this email, and I will highlight the sections that will include public comment opportunities, and I will provide additional resources so everyone can work on their comments and submit.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Do we have any other questions, comments on the topic, on the water issues that we've been talking about today, or?
Once again, it's Sade Hogue again with Bayou City Waterkeeper. I'm just so thankful for all of the work that you do. And I am so excited just about being empowered and being able to move forward. It's not necessarily a question, but it's more so of a statement. Water is life. And if we don't take responsibility for trying to save our water and trying to save, how this affects us in every day, we're going to really have a situation moving forward. And I just want to tell everybody on the call, thank you for being here. But also, we got to join together, build a coalition so that we can stand together to make our lives better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for such kind words, and thank you so much for being here. It's just very, very heartwarming. And we're together, yeah, we're the power together. So we're gonna. Dave?
Yeah, shout out. Thank you, Sade. Thank you, Evgenia, Lindsay, Noah. Y'all, again, I told you earlier, seeing you on TV randomly is awesome. Reading about you in the paper is awesome. And thank you, everybody, for your participation. The interest in data centers, I'm going to drop in the chat again an invite to the Keep the Power On campaign. It's our energy side of this work. So this is our water side. We have our energy side as well. May 26th, we have a Keep the Power On, call it KTPO meeting, virtual just like this, about data centers. We're going to have a little bit of a panel with Kendra from Amarillo, Camille Cook from Public Citizen, and another person, I believe, from San Marcos, just talking about what's ahead for their organizing. And we want to tie it to state targets. So the Public Utility Commission of Texas, who you learned about a little bit tonight, and ERCOT. What are they doing at those two state agencies regarding data centers? There's a lot of local work and municipal fights, and there's calls for moratoriums and things like that. But we just want to have that conversation. So we want folks who care about energy to care about water and vice versa. I think we all do. We're not monoliths. So go ahead and sign up, and you're welcome to join us here in a couple weeks again. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for this update, Dave. This is great information. Should be a great meeting. I'm sure it will. And as you can see in the chat, there's an email that Lindsay shared. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Lindsay. And there are also emails of our group, so feel free to reach out to us. My name is first here, Evgenia Spears, and then Dave, and we don't have all volunteers present right now, but all of them make great impact on this effort. And so thank you so much for being with us tonight. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to our speakers, our dear speakers. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, super informative. I learned a lot. I know I participated a little bit behind the scenes in the creation of this report, but I never heard the full presentation because I think the output, the result of this work is just amazing. So thank you so much. And we will see you in June 8th. I hope you saved that date as I talked about earlier. And I owe you a follow-up email with the meeting recording and with all the resources that we discussed today. And the talking points, yes. Thank you all. Have a great night.